Good morning, everyone. We will begin the Finance Committee meeting for the Lee Summit School District, May 17th, 2023. Thank you for being here today. We have a full agenda, many items to cover, so we'll jump right into it. Item 1.01, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Segan.
Hello, good morning, everybody. So we completed our request for proposal process for our school-based health partnership, and we decided to propose a partnership with Rediscover and Country Crossroads Counseling. Rediscover will offer wraparound services in our school, including individual therapy, family support, access to a psychiatrist, crisis management, and more. And then we will utilize Country Crossroads in the future to help us with group counseling and crisis support as well. These two partnerships will be in addition to the partnership that we already have with Burrell Comprehensive Mental Health, and to just provide more services to our students and families here in LSR7. This will not be at any cost to the district, as these agencies use private insurance and Medicaid to pay their staff.
Thank you, Dr. Segan. Any questions? All right. Thank you. Moving on to 1.02, contracts, $15,000 and less. Fairly typical list of items that we would typically see this time of year. Hotel rooms for sporting teams and activities and other clubs who are going out of town for end of the year activities. In each of the buildings. A few items on here that will help us start the year next fall. So, are there any questions regarding the items that are on the list of contracts under 15,000? All right, thank you. Moving on to 1.03, contracts greater than 15,000. We're going to highlight all the items that are new contracts later in the meeting. We've already highlighted one with Dr. Segan, but I just want to bring to your attention, there are 3 renewals on this list that the board will consider tomorrow night. But we won't go into detail unless you would like to go into detail on those today. But one is the Avid contract, that's a renewal. Capturing Kids' Hearts, that's a renewal. And then further down on the list, Interactive Vision Solutions, that's a renewal as well. Oh, and then one other one here, University of Missouri, that's a renewal as well. All these other items we will go through as we go through the agenda. Any questions on this list, at least on the renewals? All right, thank you. Moving on to 1.04, photography services for athletics. I'll turn this over to Krista Taglia.
Good morning, everyone. This is a district-wide contract for athletic photography. We have had a previous contract and it had run its course, so it was time to go back out for bid. We did that. We received 7 proposals that were responsive, and an evaluation committee that was comprised of yearbook staff, athletic staff, administrators, and purchasing reviewed all of those proposals and decided that there were 6 of those that they wanted to recommend for an award. And we are recommending that many in order to give everyone the opportunity for variety, and also having a backup or, working with more than one vendor if they so choose. So we are recommending award to Interstate Studios, Pierce Photo, Strawbridge Studios, Bobby Sue Photography, JR Photo, and Summit Studio. Are there any questions? Okay, then I think what I'll do is I'll go to the next one, which is also photography services, and this is district-wide. It's a little bit different than the athletic in that this group of vendors, you'll see some are repeat from the athletic contract, but this is for more of the class photos, senior pictures, photographers for new board member photos, things like that. So it kind of encompasses a lot broader scope. And again, an RFP was put out, and it was evaluated by a committee of those that would use this contract. And they are recommending award to 5 photography firms. And they are Interstate Studios, Pierce Photo, Roland Studios, Shutterfly, Life Touch, and Strawbridge Studios. Are there any questions on that one? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Taglia, thank you. Moving on to item 1.06, content filtering. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Whaley or Ms. Wooderson.
Good morning. This item is for a 3-year agreement for the district's content filtering services. This includes filtering devices on and off campus and includes the home filtering component, which we're currently using. We've negotiated a 3-year agreement with a slight price increase each year, with the first year matching what we have been paying. Is there any questions? All right, then item 107 is also one I'll speak to. This is with Converge One for network firewall subscriptions and support. This is the licensing and support for the district's firewalls. We've got multiple that serve different purposes throughout the district. This is just over 1 year of a contract. We co-termed it to better align with our budget cycle. And are there any questions? Thank you.
Moving on to 1.08, diligent contract for board docs. Not sure if Ms. Ismert is on this. Ms.
I'm here.
Hi.
Hi. So Board Docs is our electronic board packet, and we have been using them since 2007. And then we upgraded to Board Docs Pro in 2010, and we're requesting to upgrade to Board Docs Pro Plus in order to have committee access. So right now, when we put committees in there, access is to everyone that's has a Board Docs password. And we'd like to make it so that each committee is separate and can only the board members in that committee can access it, and as well as the administrators. Right now, we are when we have closed content, it does offer us some exposure that we'd like to lock down. If anybody has any questions, glad to answer.
Linda, are you saying that before, like if you gave somebody access, they would also have access to closed meeting content? Like there's no way to restrict that without this particular addition?
So when we went in February, this was a back end issue, we went to an approval tree. And when we did that, we gave more people access. And that is where we ran into the closed content portion being having some additional exposure.
Gotcha. Okay. Makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ismert. Moving on to item 1.09, Integrative Vision Solutions. Dr. Mathis.
Yes, Integrative Vision Solutions is a company that we have been contracting with for orientation and mobility services for students with visual impairments. This is a hard to fill position. We're reallocating salary position for that, but our hope is to have somebody internally in the next year that would be able to meet these needs. But this particular organization we've been contracting with and is already familiar with and has developed relationships with our students.
Dr. Mathis, I remember this one from last year.
Yes.
I have, so I'm curious, if we go to hire somebody and our budget for this, I mean, we're only expecting to spend $15,000 a year. Would you hire a full-time or are you looking for a part-time person?
So we have had part-time people in the past in the position, and then we currently have a teacher of students with visual impairments who is working on that certification, and that would become just a part of that particular position if we were able to do that dual role. The other thing that can happen is if there were additional times available in the day and we had a person who could do orientation and mobility work, we could actually let other school districts contract with us to utilize those services. And
That
that's
would be
happened before too.
Okay. Yeah, because I see they increased $50 an hour. What was the justification for them increasing it that much from last year?
It is, they are not charging mileage building to building while in district and or to different community places if they take the students in the community.
Gotcha. Okay. Makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions about integrative vision? Okay. McGraw-Hill, these are direct instruction materials. This is not actually something new per se, but it's the amount of money that has put this on the agenda. We utilize direct instruction materials within our department, specifically in our class program, communication, language, and social skills programs. These are very individualized direct instruction materials that we have been utilizing in the program for several years. We currently have the American Rescue Plan grant that we are using funds to increase our instructional resources for staff. And so due to the amount that we're spending and also having some available to some students who could utilize those in a cross-categorical program, that is why it's on the agenda, but these are not necessarily new instructional materials. Any questions about the McGraw-Hill? Okay, thank you.
Mathis, thank you. Moving on to item 1.11. Turn over to Dr. Barger.
Good morning, everyone. Ed Connective is a service that aligns teachers and or administrators with coaching and or one-on-one professional development by seeking out, or they have cadres of experts in certain areas, matching those experts with teachers and or leaders and working at a coaching, creating a platform for coaching. This particular contract is designed to provide our middle and high school reading, recovery reading teachers with some specified coaching in the area of science and of reading, knowing that we've had an intensified effort at the elementary school, but that looks vastly different at the middle and high school level, but still needs to be an emphasis. Also knowing that our reading teachers at the high school range in the area of being an expert teacher in science of reading to being relatively new to it. So trying to find a differentiated way to provide support for that group of leaders while expanding their understanding and collaboration around science of reading. So Ed Connective is going to match our reading teachers with science of reading experienced coaches to provide that professional development at the secondary level.
Dr. Barger, I didn't want to interrupt. I wanted to make sure, are you
I'm
done
good.
present? Okay,
I
I just want, I didn't want to like jump on you if you were Still
Nope,
speaking.
I'm good.
I am just wondering about this resource. First of all, I think it's great. I'm really pleased to see that we're giving our secondary teachers a science of reading resource, because I know you and I have had multiple conversations about that in our board policy committee meetings. So is this kind of an on-call resource? Like if a secondary teacher is trying to develop a lesson plan and help a student, they can just set this meeting up with one of these resources?
So that's a good question. We're actually going to match individual teachers with the coach. So there is a process in which there is sort of a questionnaire. What kind of coach do you, would you like one to meet after school? Do you want to meet where there's a Q&A and we get them paired up with the specific coach within that pool. And then that reading teacher essentially has an assigned coach. They will have Friday mornings during collaboration time to work with that coach. That doesn't mean that every Friday they will be, but that'll be an assigned time. The idea is I try something in my classroom, I work with you. What do we think? How did it go? So that it really is about building a relationship with our 18, maybe, let me see if I have 18. I think there are 18 of them, secondary teachers where they actually are paired with a specific coach that belongs to them.
Okay. Is there a maximum number of hours that they're able to utilize these coaches, or is this just,
Nope.
you know,
Yeah, we
blankets?
actually, it actually ends up being much more cost efficient to, once you get past like 3 or 4 hours with a coach, to just pay for the all you can get coaching. And so we have set some parameters in which we're going to expect, some minimums, but really we've allowed these teachers to craft what that looks like. And then we're going to meet regularly. Our reading teachers who are accessing these coaches will then have department meetings together so that they can bring what they're learning from their respective coaches together and collaborate around what that might look like to systematizing some maybe changes in practice department wide.
Okay, so there is an expectation that our reading specialists or your teachers who are, acting that function are utilizing this resource.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Absolutely. And then there'll be some peer-to-peer accountability, because when we come together, they're going to have to bring what they've done with their coach essentially to their peer group.
Gotcha. Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet. All right. Any more on that one? Because I think the next one is mine as well. All right. Marzana Resources, this one's pretty exciting. We're getting ready to undertake pretty significant curriculum revision work for the district, knowing that we have so many state standards. And for that many years, we've been talking about the need to prioritize group them, as well as create some real clarity for teachers with regard to, great example, magnets. We teach magnets in like 10 grades. So to have absolute clarity with how deep are magnets taught at 6th grade, how deep are magnets taught at 8th grade, how deep are they taught, what is proficiency at each level, so that we have real consistency across the district. So that involves developing some proficiency scales. So it's going to be some pretty substantial work in our curriculum department, and we want our building principals and curriculum leaders to be able to walk alongside as experts in that work as our teacher teams are writing and doing the work. So ahead of our curriculum teams writing and doing that work, we're going to bring in some professional development around effective prioritization of standards, development of proficiency scales, and what does that really look like in terms of consistency and efficiency and teacher clarity of instruction. And so Marzano by far is the national expert on that. So we are pairing up with Marzano Resources to provide multiple days of professional development, including a 2-day session in the fall for our principals, a 1-day session, kind of a bridged version of that for our assistant principals, 2 days of technical training for our curriculum teams, and then a one-on-one day in which the consultant works with each team reviewing their work. So this is designed to guide prioritization of standards and clarity of curriculum work.
So is this training happening in the days that are teacher in service days before the school year starts, or are these different days that you're bringing the staff in to do this training?
Good question. So for the administrators, it will just be it'll be, a school day essentially, where we've got 2 days set aside. Our curriculum writing teams, as is the case always, our curriculum writing teams get pulled in to do curriculum writing on sub days. This will be essentially the first, we'll train the first of them when we pull them in, but we really aren't going to be getting to teachers out of classrooms with this particular training until we get to summer, because the folks that'll be engaging in this training will be our principals, our assistant principals, and our curriculum specialists and department chairs who are not in classroom folks.
Gotcha. So it's their normal contract days where school may not be in session, but they're doing this work.
Well, or school is in session, but they aren't assigned. So for example, our ELA curriculum specialist, their full-time job is in the SLC. They don't have classes. And so school might be in session, but our curriculum specialists will be together, learning together, so that when we start pulling teams of, 3 third grade English teachers or 5 third grade English teachers together to write curriculum, which will be later down the road, the people who have gone through this training are experts in help guiding that work.
Understood.
Yep.
Is this intended to be just this year? Because I know I see the focus being this year and next year, this work is going to take place. So is the training going to repeat again next year, or is this the expectation just this one time?
Yes and no. So really, I'm a firm believer in you have to begin with the end in mind. And so we're doing a pretty front heavy load on making sure everyone knows where we want to be at the end of year 2 before we start year 1. So this is pretty substantial work in terms of training and technical training and understanding. Might there be a day or 2 of consultation that we plug in next year to help support, extend that work, make sure we're on track, catch some folks up? Yes, but I don't anticipate anything of this level of support necessary moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Other questions? All right, thank you.
Dr. Barger, moving on to item 1.13, Everbridge, Crisis Communication Services. In an effort to continue to improve our ability to communicate during a crisis, we reviewed available products on the market, spoke with Lee Summit Police Department, Lee Summit Fire Department, also the city, to see what tool they were using. We have come to the point where we believe Everbridge is the best product available for us. It allows us multiple modes of two-way communication in times of crisis, as well as allows us to coordinate easily with fire and police in the city. Since we're not integrating with, but partnering with the same system that they are. This is a 1-year contract with the option 3 additional years on a year-by-year basis. Any questions?
I just have a little bit of education, maybe for me or anybody else that's listening to this. And so is this intended not just to be internal, but is this external communication to parents and, if there's an issue in the building that the parents are aware, or is this just for people in our building, our district folks?
Internal and external communication. So we have the ability through the system to set up, I'll say, groups. And so, our district level emergency operation team can have its own group. We could have a group of all the administrators. Each building can have their own group. So Leeds Summit North can speak within its own administrative team, or just to the Leeds Summit North staff and the Leeds Summit North parents and the Leeds Summit North students, as we put this data, all this data, communication data into the system. So it allows for both internal and external communications, and it is a very robust system that allows us to communicate with a variety of groups, teams, as we set them up.
Excellent. I like it. Okay. Makes sense. I don't think I have any other questions. I think it sounds like a really good tool, especially since this has been a year of focus. I know for you, Dr. Shelton, and doing all of the trainings and the simulations that we've done to try and make sure that the district is prepared for the what ifs. So I think this sounds like a really great addition to all of that focus.
I believe it will be a great addition, and there are a lot of team members in the district that have really made this a priority. And so very excited about the progress we've made. At Board Member Eslick, I would anticipate as we get a little bit further down the road with this product that we'd have a closed session with the board to show all the aspects of the system.
That would be excellent. Yes. And I know that I asked this question in our board docs meeting questions, but just for the public, we have a system currently that will operate, at least in the interim, concurrently with this one, right? While we kind of determine whether we need both.
I want to use School Messenger for our, I'll say, mass communication, but it's a one-way communication tool. We were able to push information out very efficiently with School Messenger. It did not have the features that we felt like we needed for the two-way communication in times of crisis, and so this system allows us a two-way communication. While School Messenger is really a wonderful product for pushing information out, but not really getting information back.
Okay. Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to 1.14, linked strategic partners. As we begin a very robust revision of the comprehensive facility master plan, very important aspect of that is engaging our community. And so looking back to the past comprehensive facility master plans and the processes we went through, the feedback we received was very positive in the way we went about getting engagement from our community. And that's internal community, our stakeholders inside the district, building leaders, students, staff, as well as our community, parents, taxpayers, business community. And so we went out to market, put out an RFP, and looked at who was available. We got 3 responses. We evaluated those responses. By far, the highest rated of those 3 responses was Link. It was a company that we've used in past. So in 2018-19, when we did this previously, we used Link in that iteration of the CFMP. So we have had multiple meetings with them to talk about scope of work, refine that scope of work. We have negotiated down the original contract of $180,000 to $150,000. And so we bring this forward to the board this month for approval. Any questions?
So just because we've talked about 2 different engagement platforms or companies, this is entirely separate from the one that we have talked about that has to do with our PR communication strategy, like group that we're going to have facilitate that sort of community engagement process, right? This is totally different.
Thank you for bringing that forward, Board Member Essick. Yes, this is totally different. And we have talked internally about the importance of making sure we're marketing and strategically planning this work to make sure there's no confusion as to the work we're doing in both regards. And in addition to the PR engagement, this engagement, we're also under Dr. Barger's leadership going to be engaging our community on the Comprehensive School Improvement Plan, the CSIP. And so the work, it's a lot of engagement, but yes, this is part of an overall plan for engagement, but specifically this is for the CFMP.
Yes, I was thinking that we have the CSIP, we have this, we have the communications. Our public is going to be engaged out very quickly. So hopefully we have a good strategy for maybe kind of like staggering some of this to help not wear out the community and make sure we are getting good engagement. Because that would be my concern, is I think all of this is great, that we are going to the public and asking for their opinion. I just have a minor concern that, we have probably a limited portion of the public that's actually active and wanting to be engaged. And then if we kind of overwhelm them with all of these opportunities, does it diminish? We get diminishing returns on how much feedback and engagement we're able to actually gain.
We totally agree. We're working hard to avoid that engagement fatigue that might come along. So Ms. Bergen is working very diligently along with Dr. Barger and I to put together a very clear communication opportunity plan for our community, to show them the opportunity we have and to give our community choices. Where do they want to engage? At what level do they want to engage? And so it's very mindful of those concerns that you brought forward.
Great to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to 1.15, going to turn it over to Mr. Holder.
Good morning. What we have before us is a new contract. This is related to the potential for our district to reclaim some dollars related to an alternative fuel tax credit. Because the majority of our bus fleet runs on compressed natural gas, and that is considered an alternative fuel. We were made aware that there may be some credits available for us. So we were contacted by the firm that was listed. But as part of that contact and our research into this, we decided to release an RFP to see if there was also other firms or we could get some other interest in this. Trans Tax Advisory LLC was the only respondent to the RFP. But what they are proposing is a 1-year agreement, and then we'll have the option to renew for 3 years. There is no upfront cost to this agreement. It is only a cost to the district if we receive tax credit revenue back. And so it's the first year is at 25%. That would be the fee. If we use them in future years, it would be 20%. But again, that would just be, we would receive the revenue in. So if it's $10,000, our net gain would be $7,500 and our fee would be $2,500. So it is, again, a relatively new process. I've been aware of other, not related to natural gas, but sometimes telecom reviews and audits that companies will come in and do. But, you know, natural gas is still a relatively unique thing for districts to run buses on. And so it's kind of, I believe, a niche area. So we think it's certainly something worth exploring. And if there's money out there that we can reclaim, then, you know, we definitely think that would be a benefit for the district. Any questions on that?
No questions, but did want to say thank you, Mr. Holder, for exploring this, because I do think that this is great. And, you know, if it doesn't cost the district anything to explore the option, I think it's an excellent opportunity to see what we can gain. So thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holder. Moving on to section 2, facilities. Turn it over to Mr. Gorell.
Thank you. Have a number of items to review today. It's okay. The first 2 items I'd like to discuss together. They are similar and have a lot of related components. So as I think most people know, intercoms and fire alarms are essential systems in our buildings. Intercoms are essential to our emergency operations plan. They provide not only direct communication from staff in the building to the offices, but also mass communication within the building when needed, and also to our bus lanes and playgrounds people. So they are also integrated into our panic alarm systems. So it's a way for an extreme emergency for the building to be notified. And then fire alarms, of course, are code required. It is essential that we keep those up to date. And when you have problems with fire alarms, education is disrupted. We all know what happens when a fire alarm goes off. So we have approximately 30 of each of these systems in our district. And so in knowing that each of them have a hard time lasting 30 years, we need to be replacing at least one a year. And that is budgeted in our long-range capital plan. So we score and evaluate them just kind of based on their age, the maintenance history, the time and money that we spend maintaining them, and how hard it is to get parts for them. And so each year we put out a bid, and that's reflected in these 2 agenda items. So Electronic Corporation of America was our low bidder, only received 2 bids. this year, which has been somewhat typical for trades bids in our experience over the last few years. We are comfortable with them as a bidder, have worked with many of their staff and the system that they are proposing. So I'll be glad to answer any questions about these two items. All right, if it's okay, I'll just go ahead and move on to the next item. We issued an RFP through IonWave, our bidding platform for on-call mechanical, electrical, plumbing services, and ancillary services for that matter, audio, visual, and code type design. So typically our MEP design comes as a sub-consultant to an architect. We are getting into a time period where we have some larger building systems that are going to require a direct contract for us to work through more efficiently with an engineering company. Our next two big mechanical projects will be system replacement at Campbell Middle School, as well as Meadow Lane Elementary School. Those are not just simple rooftop buildings, and they will require some design effort to prepare the bid documents. So we had a team that scored and reviewed the proposals. We received 4 responses, and the top 2 separated themselves from the other 2 for each one of the scores. That is with Henderson Engineering and Langford Fendler. And so we'd like to recommend an on-call contract with both of the companies, which just allows us a little more flexibility and some quality control checks between them. They were almost identical in their pricing, their hourly rates, and we like to recommend contract. I'll be glad to answer any questions. All right, moving on. The next contract is for, again, on-call fencing services. And so we have had a contract in the past that has expired, and so we've rebid. This is for both planned fencing needs and reactionary needs. We have a lot of both throughout the year. And so we did have some respondents. Extreme Fence was the low bidder, and they were actually the contract holder of our last contract, so we're comfortable with them. They do a good job. They are local and very responsive to our needs. So I would recommend award and be glad to answer any questions. All right, so the next item is change order number 2 for our Paradise Park project. And if anybody's wondering, we're change order 2. This is our first change order to the project. The contracts that were bid, if you remember back to the contract award, the building project at Paradise Park was the original contract. The external site programs that was bid separately, that was actually added as a change order to the project. So there was technically in the contract a change order that happened to add that scope of work. So this change order 2 is really a culmination of all of the changes we've had throughout this school year. It has been a really good project. For those of you familiar with construction, we have not run into a lot of issues. The things on this change order, other than 2 items that I'll mentioned were fairly typical items. We did run into 2 larger unforeseen issues that came to our attention during demolition. One was that the sprinkler piping throughout the building was a lower grade sprinkler piping that was nearing the end of life. And we really just felt like it was the time to just get it replaced. Even though it may have had, 3 to 5 years of life left, there was some evidence of leaks, and you just can't go back into an existing building and replace fire sprinkler piping without a lot of work. So we went ahead and did that. That was a bulk of this change order. Another item was on the old fire station. When we removed the skin from the building, The existing masonry was in really, really poor condition. We had to rebuild most of the masonry back up in those walls. So that was another large item there. This change order can be covered in the bond contingency. We currently have about $340,000 left in our bond contingency. And we are looking good with the other items out there that feel good about this project being under budget. So I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
So I think the write-up on the contingency listed in the write-up is different than the number that you were just saying, that we have a little over $300,000 in bond contingency. Is that different than project contingency? Because that says $500,000 in the write-up in board docs. So I'm just curious, like, which one's right?
Yeah, that's a good question. We do have $500,000 in contingency for the project. We have spent about 160 of that, and we used that for playground equipment that was not in the contract.
Okay, so you're saying total there was 500, 160 is
Mhm.
gone, so the rest is what we have to cover this change order of 211, which would leave roughly like what, 40,000 is, I don't, actually I need to do math. Don't do math in public, right? So how much would we have left then?
We have 340
Okay, so you said three.
left.
Okay.
Yeah, so and this is a $211,000. So there's about 100,
Yeah.
120,
So
130,000 left.
a good amount is
Yep.
kind of what I was getting at. Okay. And it looks
Yep.
like a lot of the issues with the major facility have probably already been discovered. Would you kind of
Yeah.
say that that's accurate?
Yeah, they're actually working on finishes right now. They're painting walls, and building looks great. We're in good shape to get the project wrapped up, get kids moved in.
So that's great.
Yeah.
Okay. So the project should be pretty well on budget, even with the changes.
Yes, that's correct.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Welcome. The final item is the bond budget update that everybody is familiar with seeing. We are showing still about approximately $6 million fund balance. Just as a reminder, a lot of that is still unencumbered furniture and could be held for some construction changes. We've still got a long ways to go, at least some at high school, but we're looking good overall, big picture with the bond. And we do expect a large chunk of this money to be able to be used for future capital projects moving forward. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Mr. Burrell, thank you. We'll move on to section 3, finance.
All right, our first item for finance is just our monthly transfer that we do almost every month with transferring money from our general fund, Fund 1, into Fund 2 to our special revenue fund. Just a reminder, Fund 2 is where we pay all certificated staff. So anyone that has a position that requires a teaching or administrative certificate from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, they are paid from what is known as Fund 2, or the Special Revenue Fund, or sometimes referred to as the Teachers Fund. So every month, except for a couple months where we don't have a lot of Fund 2 expenses, generally that's in the summer, then we will make a transfer. So this month, that amount is $4,206,276.35. Any questions on that? All right, we'll jump into our financials as of April 30th. Looking at our revenue and expense report, we are definitely at the time of year where we can do some strong comparisons to past years and usually in particular the year before to see how we are tracking. We are 10 months into our fiscal year, so we just have May and June remaining. And so the We'll just go through quickly and highlight some of these items in both the revenue and the expense column, and then take any questions when we are done. So you can see that in Fund 1, our operating fund, we are tracking very well with where we should finish the year. Our budget estimate, I think, in our operating fund is a good one. I would anticipate we'll receive a little bit more revenue than we've budgeted in the operating fund. We still have just a little bit of local tax revenue come in, but we've received 98% of that, maybe even 99% of that at this point. But we have some payment requests from our title programs, as well as our Part B, which are special education programs. Those are federal programs that are administered by the state of Missouri. And so we make payment requests based on expenditures that we've already made. Typically, those are 80 to 90% salaries is what we use that for in those programs. So we have made those requests, and I would anticipate receiving that in May in both Fund 1 and Fund 2. So if you look at our combined year to date in Fund 1 and Fund 2, we've received 89.92% of our budgeted revenue. You compare that to last year, 90.35%. We're tracking right where we need to be. And remember, our budget amendment in February, I think, is going to end up being a fairly good estimate, but would anticipate we'll probably be a little over in both those areas. Debt service, again, we are above what we budgeted. That will continue to go up just a little bit over the next 2 months. We will not have any expenses or maybe a $250 admin fee that would come out on the expense side in our debt service. But we're essentially done with those expenditures. And so we will just be adding to the balances in our debt service between now and June. Our bond revenue, again, not historically high interest rates, but certainly in the last decade, high interest rates that we are benefiting from. The bond fund we're definitely seeing that, as well as in our other funds. So we'll continue to track that, and then hopefully, obviously, be able to add to our bottom line. So the bond report that Kyle just went over, I'd certainly hope that next year, or possibly in June when we do the amendment, we can add to that available budget, which is a good thing. Capital projects, again, tracking ahead there. Our local revenue tracked very well there, and then our M&M revenue on a percentage basis, we put a little bit more in there just to make sure our capital projects fund remains healthy. So then you track over to nutrition services. Again, from a revenue standpoint, we're looking good there. 88%, and we have 2 months left. We will still receive a good payment in May, as well as June, as well as some local revenue that remains in May. So I think we're tracking pretty well there. Activity is right where we would expect it to be at the end of April. We're winding things down. There'll be a little bit more revenue received. There'll be some more expenses, especially in June with some of our camps. But we're pretty much where we would anticipate being, and you can see that as comparison to last year in our activity revenue. And then BASS, before and after school, again, 83.4%. We're tracking right where we would anticipate our budget being with revenue for BASS. Moving down to the expense, again, if we just want to look at operating and special revenue fund together, 77.82 compared to 77.04 last year. I really think our expense budgets in both those areas, of course, it's not going to be exact, and we may adjust up or down in one or both of those areas, but really it's very representative of where we would expect to be in April. Our special revenue fund in particular, 76.41, 75% of teaching salaries have been expended through April. We still have May, June, and July that will be on this fiscal year, but then we also have sub expenses that fall under there. We have spent most of the money that we will on our sub budget, as well as any 12-month or longer than 182-day contract employees. We are ahead of the 75% threshold for those employees. So 76.41 is tracking very well. Just remember debt service, we will amend that in June to reflect that escrow payment that was hanging out there with UMB. But as we get to the balance sheet, I'll point out our fund balances are very strong in debt service. And then bond, we will continue to spend towards that. As we look towards the FY24 budget, we will, whatever our revenues are and balances are in next fiscal year, we will expect to spend that amount in FY24. And so towards the end of FY24, we should basically spend all the bond money that we have available. We certainly hope so by next school year. Capital projects, it's tracking. We'll have a little bit more in capital projects between now and June 30th, but not a ton. So we'll probably trend towards 15 million, possibly a little under, possibly a little over. A lot of that just depends on the work done. But you got to keep in mind, most of the work that's done in June, we won't get billed for that till July. Or if we receive it in June, it would have to be within a certain time frame for us to pay that in this fiscal year. So I would anticipate just a little bit more expense there. Nutrition services, we're tracking pretty well. Remember, nutrition services through April 30th, we have purchased the bulk of our food supply. There's still ordering that goes on, milk orders, those types of things. But with the end of school, you tend to wrap up the supplies and use the supplies that you have towards that May 25th last day of school. And so a lot of our food expenses have already been incurred through April 30th. So I think that budget, we might have to adjust a little bit, but it's going to track pretty well with where we're at. Same with activity. Again, a lot of that has occurred by April 30th. And then before and after school services, I think that's tracking pretty well. We may have to amend that a little bit, but if we have to amend our expenses up, I think our revenues will be amended up as well. So I think we're tracking pretty well with what's budgeted in Bass. So moving down to the bottom right, just see, again, very healthy fund balances in our nutrition services fund, as well as our activity fund. I thought it was interesting in our activity and foundation fund. If you look at that fund balance, it's almost exactly, they almost match year over year, which is pretty rare, and it's just an anomaly, but it's still interesting to see that those balances are basically the same. And then before and after school services, again, we know that we have a deficit in there, but that is lower than it was at the end of March. We'll continue to gain on that. And we are in a better situation there than we were last year at this time. So finally, if you go to the bottom left, you look at our current fund balance, we're healthy on a percentage basis, or we're operating a little bit higher than we were at this point last year, and certainly on a dollar basis. So if you think about that, and you think about the February amendment that we did, we knew that our dollar amounts of fund balances would rise. We anticipate them rising. But our operating reserve percentage was showing that it would be exactly the same. Now, it probably won't land exactly the same. It may be a little higher, maybe a little lower if we choose to transfer more into our capital projects. But you can see that represented really here at the end of April. Even though the dollar amount is just under $8 million higher, you can see that percentage compared to where we were last year is not that much higher. It's less than a percentage point when we review that. So any questions on the revenue and expense report? All right, we'll look at the investment report next. And really the only thing I wanted to highlight here, two things. When you look at the top, right there, you can see, and go over to the maturity date column, you can see between now and Christmas, we really have quite a few just about $8.4 million worth that will come due, and we'll have the opportunity to reinvest. And that's a positive because outside of the Treasury, you see that 4.88%, the Treasury bill about the fifth line down. That was actually just a short-term investment that we made in early April that will come due in July. If you look at all those other percentages there, now there was some CDs from 2018 that have turned out to be a very good decision back in November of 18 to get that 3.5% over 5 years. But I point this out just to make the point that if you go on down, if you'll scroll down, Hannah, and you look at our liquid rate, currently 4.79. Actually, yesterday we get a weekly update on what the liquid interest rate is. It's at 4.9 as of yesterday. And so generally anything that we do further out, although it's kind of unique because actually if you invest for 5 years right now, you're getting lower than what the liquid is. But we anticipate with the leveling of interest rates that the 3 to 4 or 5 year will start to go back up. But we're in a good position with the 8.4 million coming off the next 7 months, that we're going to be able to increase our investment income. And so just a good thing that I wanted to highlight this morning with everything that'll be coming due. And you'll notice a lot of those are 0.3, 0.25. So we're going to go from, a 0.25, for example, to over a 5% in some of these cases. All right. And you'll notice some term investments at the bottom. Again, just trying to capture a little bit better interest rate for those shorter terms than is available in the liquid market right now. All right. Any questions on the investment report?
For the reinvestments that you're planning to do with some of that 8 million that's coming due, is the plan to put those back into, looks like most of them are 4 or 5 year, maybe some 3 year. Is that still the plan to do kind of the same term?
Yeah, so yes, because we want to, one of the things we look at is trying to maintain a little bit of a laddered approach. And you'll notice when you go down to the bottom of this sheet, we don't have any 4 or 5 year. And the biggest reason for that is in the last 9 months, especially the shorter term is where your highest yield is, just because if you look out 5 year right now, you might get 3.5%. Well, you can grab a 2 year that might be a 5.5%. And so, but as I've talked about in past months, it's kind of that balance of we probably will grab some 5 years just because. And those CDs are a good example that were purchased in 2018. There's a lot of years between 2018 and now where that 3.5% was really good when we were getting 0.1 in our liquid. And so it's just kind of that balance. So I think it's a good time, especially in the next 6 months, that we will try to grab some more 4 and 5 year just so we can stay laddered with our approach. So we don't have large chunks of money that are coming due in 2 years, and we might be in a different environment there. And then we're in a situation where we're, our investment income is dropping because we grabbed the short-term yield and the long-term is not as good.
Makes sense. Just a procedural question with like the CDs. When we earn that interest rate, does it get then reinvested? Is that how we approach those?
So the way that we're set up now with UBS in particular, MOSIP is different. The term investment with MOSIP is that you don't realize the yield on that until it comes due. With these investments, we receive monthly income, for lack of a better term, from these investments. And so we count on, anything that we invest here, they send it back to us monthly. So when these come due, say it's $1 million, it will be $1 million that we have available to reinvest at that time. That's the way we're set up.
Okay, so we're actually taking the proceeds monthly.
Monthly, yes.
So we're not reinvesting them. We are kind of recouping them back into our cash flow. Is that how?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, our last item is our balance sheet. And again, just to run through these real quick, and I know we have a new board member, Dr. Johnson, joining us this morning. We have on our balance sheet, this is a reflection, our assets, our liabilities, and then in general, our fund balance at the bottom is where we started the year under the fund balance column, that initial column, and then our revenues and expenses year to date. So if we go back up, we look in our liability column, we usually have liabilities under P cards because we have incurred expenses, but we haven't put those through yet because they might not be coded to the account yet. But those expenses happen, with the purchasing card. It's a point of sale purchase in some instances. Well, really in all instances with the P card. So we almost always have some liability. Some months it'll be lower than that. Some months it may be a little higher than that, that shows up on our balance sheet. But when you look at the bottom, the total liabilities and fund balance, it's a very good reflection of where we stand. So just looking through there, again, when we make the transfer from the general fund to the teacher fund, we zero that out every month. And that will be the way it is on June 30th. We'll make a transfer and we will begin the year with a zero balance there. Fund 1 and Fund 2 are really very interchangeable in the sense that transferring money from Fund 1 to Fund 2, they are both considered operating funds and are part of your operating fund balance when you look at whatever our percentage is. However, once you put money in Fund 2, you can't take it back out. It has to stay there. Debt service fund, I mentioned that earlier, the 31.6 million, that will only go higher between now and June 30th. Some of our debt service projections that we've seen from several months ago had that just around 31 or a little below. So not a huge difference there, but it will help when we start doing projections, especially for 25, where that fund balance is. It also presents us an opportunity, which I'll mention now, that I've talked about previously. Next year, we do plan to prepay some bonds that are callable that we're currently paying 5% on, that we will have the cash and debt service to do that. So we'll save quite a bit of money. We should be able to save, I would anticipate, at least in the millions for our debt service. That will help us for 2025. Capital projects, again, you see that we're just below 6. We have planned to transfer into there, and we may look, at finishing the year healthy, which I anticipate that we will. Right now it's 6 million. We may consider bumping that up to closer to 8. Again, just anticipating a lot of capital project work in the next few years that's outside of bond work. Going across there, you see our bond capital fund. That will eventually be zero at the end of next year. And then nutrition services, our activity, as well as our BAS, is an exact reflection of where we are with our revenue and expense report when we show balances there. So any questions on the balance sheet? All right.
Actually, I do have just one small question about the debt service prepayment you were talking about of paying off our bonds.
Yep.
That's excellent that we're you said save $4 million. Is that what you were saying?
I hedged. I said millions. It will be more than $1 million.
Okay.
I don't want to say how many million until we get to that point. Yeah, that's why I hesitated slightly. But yes, it's.
We won't hold you to it.
Yeah.
Okay. So what, I don't know if you know this offhand, so sorry if I'm blindsiding you, but what's the dollar value of the bonds that we're going to be paying off?
Well, that is a decision to be made when we see, there's really 2 factors into that. One, what is our ending fund balance at the end of this year? And 2, what do we anticipate our revenue being within that? So, and how do we anticipate structuring future bond issues? So we have the flexibility to essentially pay these off. We'll have to maintain, obviously some fund balance in that debt service fund, But essentially what it does is we can pay those off, we can save money, and then it opens up for a no tax bond. It opens up that amount that we can borrow in future years because it's not, debt that we have on the books. So that will be a really interesting decision and conversation that we will bring forward in the fall, about how aggressive do we want to be, because I think we'll have some opportunity there. Obviously we have to maintain a certain balance in there, but if we can take care of everything that's out there at a 5% or close to all of it, that's where the savings comes in, right? The more we can prepay, the more we're saving on the back end.
Absolutely.
So I would think I will give a number, just don't hold me to it at 6 months, but I think at least 10 million, and possibly even more that we could prepay, and that could offer significant interest savings.
Yeah, well, and I mean, we're going to probably be expecting a bump to what we're pulling into our debt service simply because of the increased assessed property valuation, that is going to happen when we get the new tax property bills that are coming up here. I don't know now. That's great. I just think that's amazing that we're looking at doing that. And I look forward to hearing more about that plan because I think that's really fiscally responsible. I appreciate that. And I appreciate all the effort to try and bring forward those opportunities. So I appreciate all that work. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Hole, thank you. Moving on to section 4, something we've added over the last couple of months, future agenda items. This is a list of items that we expect to bring before the board in the coming months. As I've described in the past, this is giving you, the finance committee members, a peek around the corner to see what's coming. We work administratively, we work months at times to prepare these items. And so we have a lot of understanding, a deep understanding of what we're doing. But sometimes you see these for the first time when they come to the finance committee and to the board. And we want to give you the opportunity to see these, know that they're coming. If you ever have questions or need to refer back to this, please do. And we'll be more than happy to talk about the items that are coming your way. The other item that we've listed here in section 4 is the summer projects. So we're at that time of year, and we wanted you to know in the past, you've approved contracts, you've approved services, you've approved work to be done. And the summertime for us is a very busy time where we do a lot of the work that we can't do during the school year. And so we've prepared a list of all the summer projects. I say all, in large part, of the summer projects that we're doing at each of the buildings would include facilities under Mr. Burrell, food service under Ms. Denala, Ms. Battaglia, and what she's doing in furniture, and then with technology and Dr. Whaley and their team. So feel free to peruse this at some point, but or refer back to it. Sometimes you'll drive by a building, you'll see things going on and think, well, I wonder what's going on at Longview Farm. And you can take a look at this list and you can see some of the work that we're doing at Longview Farm this summer.
Dr. Shelton, I just want to say thank you for the level of detail and the work that your team has put into this information. This is so much. I know how much detail this really is and how time consuming it must have been. I can only imagine. So I just really appreciate your team sharing all of this with the finance committee, with the board, and taking the time to just share with the community all of the things that your office does to support our buildings, because this is takes a high level of coordination and organization, and it's no small feat. So it's really very much appreciated. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And we've said this in the past. We have a wonderful team in our school district. All the departments are highly skilled and capable of the work they do, but also the coordination, not only within those departments, but with each department within our district. It is very impressive. And in my short time here, I've sat back with amazement at all the wonderful work we do and how our teams work together to support students, support staff, and really provide our school district and our community a really wonderful school district to be proud of. So thank you for those kind words. And I will, and I agree, you know, when we talked about putting this list together, we sat back and the team that actually put this together just did a wonderful job of pulling this information. So I do appreciate their work, and I know that they appreciate your comments.
Absolutely.
All right, and as Mr. Holger mentioned earlier, we do have a new Finance Committee member, Dr. Johnson, new board member, and we appreciate your attendance here today and your involvement. We know that you bring a lot of expertise in this area, and so we appreciate all that you're doing for our board and for the Finance Committee.
I don't want to like call Dr. Johnson out at by any means. She had to go for a work meeting. So I just didn't want you to think she's not responding because she doesn't have anything to contribute, but she did have an in-person meeting. She let me know she had to hop off at 9 o'clock. So I know she was engaged, but she did have another paid work thing she had to get to. So
No, completely understand. Actually, you know, Dr. Johnson and I met yesterday to go over the agenda and kind of review it. And you know, she brings a wealth of experience, you know, and obviously she's a pharmacist, but she also works very closely with the operations of the pharmacy. She sits on their finance committee. So she brings a deep level of knowledge and understanding to the work. And so we appreciate what she does bring.
great. That's awesome.
Well, this concludes our meeting for today. Our next meeting is June 21st. And I do want to highlight one thing before we get off. The work session tomorrow afternoon at, I believe it's at 4:30. Krista Battaglia and I will be talking about the purchasing procurement procedures. And so really, obviously very connected to the work we're doing in the Finance Committee to make sure that we have policies and procedures in place that ensure that we responsibly use the tax dollars that we're given, but also use it for the purpose of supporting our students and our staff. So looking forward to making that presentation with Ms. Battaglia. All right, wonderful. We'll end today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.